Well, good morning, everyone. This is Mike Romali here, taking a look at Tropical Storm Gonzalo, which has now formed this morning. Maximum sustained winds of 50 miles per hour and a pressure down to 1,000 millibars. This is expected to continue intensifying as it heads closer to the Lesser Antilles and the Leeward Islands and the windwards here, passing just south of Barbados as a potential hurricane. The intensity forecasting on Tropical Storm Gonzalo is going to be very hard, and we'll take a look at why that is here in a minute. This is eventually expected to then pass into the Caribbean after impacting the Lesser Antilles, and this could undergo a pretty significant weakening trend as it approaches a more hostile environment to the south of Hispaniola. And again, after that, this is a rather uncertain time frame out in here. Really, this whole entire track or whole entire intensity forecast is very hard. There's no official tropical storm watches or warnings up for any of the islands right now, but we do suspect those could be coming here by tonight or tomorrow. Now, if we take a look here at the visible satellite, a couple of very interesting things have happened. And during the overnight hours, we had a fairly significant convective burst that did occur near the center of circulation. This helped to basically consolidate and form a primitive eye-like structure. And we can see that here in the visible satellite imagery, that we do have this structure that's rather almost like a little curved shrimp almost. It's very weird, a very small, tight, compacted little system here. And the other thing you notice is that we have a lot of dry, stable air to the north of the system, and that's now beginning to be entrained in. And if we take a look here at the IR satellite presentation, you can really see that we have not so deep convection now near the center of circulation. This is fairly opened up quite significantly over the last couple of hours, and if this trend does persist, we will likely see then Tropical Storm Gonzalo completely fall apart. And the reason why it wouldn't just or would completely fall apart is because of the fact that this is a very small system. The radius and maximum winds are small. If you give this any time of exposed without any deeper convection closer to the center, this thing will open up into a wave, and that's what might be happening currently. And we still have some fairly deep convection on the northern part of this, but you notice this is basically getting a very disheveled look on the western side, that a lot of that dry air is now getting entrained into the system. And if we take a look here, this is the microwave pass from earlier this morning. Again, what you're looking at here, a fairly dry air mass to the north of this. We did have some banding-like structure with a primitive eye wall on the southern and eastern side of this, but was not closed off towards the west and northwest. And that's what it's been trying to do over the course of this morning, but you can see it has rather failed to do so. We don't have any substantial deep convection that's kind of forming right near the center. Again, this is going to be very hard to depict over the next couple of hours what's going to happen. We might have some convection trying to form on the eastern side that might eventually rotate on over to the western side. And of course, this is going to help to at least sustain this for another little bit as we approach the diurnal minimum, which is the area or the time where we have minimal convection, the time where we are supposed to have minimal convection. And we saw this occur yesterday, where we had a brief period where this became fairly disorganized, and then closer to the diurnal maximum last night, we saw this once again ramp up. And one of the problems with this is that if this does persist for too long, we will end up seeing the whole structure completely collapse around Tropical Storm Gonzalo, as some very dry, stable air is kind of just shifting off from the east towards the west, kind of being entrained into the system. We have fairly dry air to the north of this system as well. Now, again, this isn't necessarily going to collapse currently, and it's not expected to do so, but but the intensity is rather uncertain. This does not have as great of a look, but on the visible satellite, this is still a decently looking structure, but you notice the eye-like structure is barely noticeable in here. A lot of dry, stable air, and you can notice some of these arc clouds that are out here. These cumulus arc clouds are very indicative of outflow boundaries that are kind of surging away from the area of convection, and again, you kind of see that setting up right here, a line of just these cumulus clouds that are not developing, being strung out. These are very indicative of dry mid-level air in the atmosphere, and that's what's expected to be occurring and really plaguing the system over the next while. But if we head back here to the presentation of the water temperatures across the area, this is the CDAS methodology of the actual skin temperatures, the sea surface temperatures in this area from tropicaltidbits.com. The system is sitting roughly in about right through here, 27 to 28 degree water temperatures, and this is expected to head into an area of fairly significant water temperatures over the next few days or so. But again, we're going to be getting a trade surge and a Saharan air push that's going to really dominate this system if it gets too far to the north and is very disheveled. And we'll take a look at that here in just a minute. But water temperatures near Barbados are running about 29 to 30 Celsius and running about 29 Celsius in the Caribbean, in the Eastern Caribbean as well, and running about 28 to 29 Celsius or even 27 Celsius right near our system currently, which is more than enough to support a tropical cyclone for sure. Now, if we take a look here, this is the 850 millibar vorticity, the spin in the atmosphere about 5,000 feet off the ground. These reds and whites here are your stronger cyclonic spin as you go up with the scale here. And again, we have a fairly decent little signature with Tropical Storm Gonzalo. Again, this is basically that trade surge that we're talking about right now that's kind of advancing and going to be rapidly evecting into Tropical Storm Gonzalo over the next few days or so. And this is going to become very important as the short-term structure of Gonzalo is going to have a big factor on what it's like tomorrow even. And again, here on the shear map here, again, this is Tropical Storm Gonzalo and the associated energy pocket right here, a moisture pocket. Fairly light shears expected over the next 24 to 48 hours or so before this eventually will get into stronger shear as it approaches the Lesser Antilles and Barbados, but still even out here, you know, 10 to 20 knots of shear. That's not drastically that significant, but you notice what's occurring out here, this big surge of trades in Saharan air that's going to bring a lot of this down to the north of the system. And again, that this short-term structure has a lot of implications. Take a look here at the Gfs forecast from tropicaltidbits.com. This is the 700 to 400 millibar relative humidity, basically higher up in the atmosphere. And these browns are your drier colors, while your greens are your wetter colors, your more moisture available. So currently, Gonzalo is sitting within a more favorable air mass. It's sitting within a relatively moist bubble, but again, you notice kind of our little surge is getting entrained into the system from time to time. Now, fast forward this out to about 7 a.m. on Thursday. We have this trade surge and subsequent Saharan air push further over top of the system to the north and northwest of the system, while we also have some shear that's being impinged off from the southwest to the northeast. And what this is going to do is that this could inhibit some intensification, as what might end up happening is some of this dry air, dry mid-level air towards the south and west of the system may eventually get wrapped in around the system, while the top of this is going to also be impinging on the available moisture content of the system and kind of shearing it and stretching it apart. And as such, by hour 54, you notice what's happening here. This trade surge is fairly prevalent, but you also have this moisture pocket now kind of strung out. This is not as tightly compacted as it once was. You're getting a strung out moisture pocket. Now at this time, by the GFS, by early Friday morning, this is still intensifying with a pressure of 998 millibars. But again, that's very uncertain, because if you can get any dry air entrainment in the short term, well, this is still trying to build a formative core, an inner core that could disrupt the core significantly, and that would take time to mix out. It takes about 6 to 12 plus hours to mix out a dry air entrainment. On general, it could be less or it could be more, but in general, it takes about 6 to 12 hours to fully mix out a dry air entrainment, depending on how strong or how weak that entrainment really is. And if that certainly is the case, then this could be an open wave by the time we get to Friday morning, or this could be a fairly formidable tropical cyclone on approach to the Lesser Antilles and the southern windwards here. Now, as we approach the Saturday time frame, by about 2 p.m. Saturday, this is approaching the Lesser Antilles. Notice the moisture pocket here is a little bit more strung out. We have a fairly significant strung out area of vorticity. We have a fairly significant dry air moisture pocket to the north of this. What this is doing is, not only as the system is gaining some latitude here, it is running into a stronger shear and stronger trade winds across this area that would eventually string out the available energy, and then basically trying to get the system to be strung out and fairly disorganized. Now, conversely, this is the HWRF model. This is valid as of 1 a.m. this morning, and it had a general pressure of about 1,007 millibars. And if we kind of move that out to where we were at about 7 o'clock, a pressure down to 1,007, a little bit more tighter, pressure of 1,005, and then eventually here, by about 2 p.m., this is, coming up within the next about 2 hours or so, pressure's down to about 1,000 millibars where we're sitting right now, and a fairly decent moisture pocket, although you do notice that there is some southwesterly dry air on the southwestern side of this system that is getting entrained from time to time, and even to the north. But this is sitting in a relatively favorable environment. And as we head through the next 24 hours, by tomorrow morning, the HWRF model deepens this to 990 and near hurricane intensity by the time we get to tomorrow, or early tomorrow morning, by about 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, this is still possible even if we get a dry air entrainment. The diurnal maximum is fairly well known for blowing stuff up and allowing storms to quickly intensify during the overnight hours. But again, if this system is rather disorganized tonight, then it has a lot to work to do to get to this point by 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. And again, the overall consensus is that this will stay in a relative moist environment by this time, a fairly tight convection. But again, you notice some of that dry air on the southwestern side of the system that's going to be entrained from time to time, and you kind of can see that there's a little bit of this alleyway of drier mid-level air to kind of be entrained into the system. Now, so far we're seeing most of our dry air entrainments on the western side of the system that rotates in around this center, because obviously a low pressure center is counterclockwise. We're getting some dry air to the north that's getting entrained, but even this dry air is relatively moist compared to the air mass down towards the south and west. And then eventually you can kind of see it dancing near hurricane intensity by 15Z Thursday, or this is probably about roughly about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. But you notice what's now starting to happen. You're getting a lot more of this dry air entrainment potentially into the system, and some dry stable air to the north. But you notice, and we'll run this out here to the about 60-hour time frame, the HWRF continues to continue to deepen this system fairly well, and a relatively favorable air mass with light overall shear across this area. And if we take a look here at the HMOM model, and if we kind of run this out to about 7 a.m. this morning, pressure is about 1,005 millibars. And then if we run that out here, this is about 8 o'clock tonight, pressure's down to 998. The overall signature is for this to intensify, and even the HMOM model deepens this into a hurricane. But look what you have now to the north, a strong trade surge with subsequent Saharan air that eventually would probably be entrained into the system at some point, with some also shear being impinged from southwest to northeast. This would also bring some of that dry air from the southwest and entrain it into the system, and that's what the HMO model is showing. That by such, you kind of get closer to the island chain here. This is by Saturday, approaching the island chain, and the system isn't as well organized. The moisture pocket is strung out. It's not as intense. And if we take a look real quick at the 850 millibar vorticity map here, you notice, well, that's still a fairly tightly compacted little system there by hour 81. It's a little bit more stretched out, and it's not as consolidated as we see here by 2 p.m. on Friday. This is a little bit more consolidated. And the GFS forecast kind of following much of the same thing. A lot more dry air is being shown on the GFS forecast all over towards the north and northwest of the system. And over the next few hours here, as we move this out to about 0Z Friday, or about 8 o'clock on Thursday evening, you notice some of that southwestern edge of this dry air mass is now starting to kind of nudge into it, while we're getting a fairly strong surge of subsequent trade surge and Saharan air. And you notice some of these wind barbs in here about 20 to 30 knots or so, very indicative of a fairly significant trade surge. And if this is actually weaker, which current trends may or may not support, if current trends continue and this does not intensify into a formidable cyclone by tonight or early tomorrow morning, it is likely that we will end up seeing this trade surge to the north and some of that dry air to the southwest getting trained tomorrow, and that would subsequently force this into basically an open wave or a fairly weak tropical system on approach to the islands. So there's a lot of things we have to kind of discuss here over the next several days or so. Really, its test is now through tonight to see how much it intensifies in the short term before finally potentially becoming a hurricane, by tomorrow morning on approach to the Lesser Antilles, then by Friday and Saturday. So we do have a lot to watch. Of course, I will be back here with another update later this afternoon at about 3 o'clock Eastern time. All right. Hope y'all have a great rest of your afternoon and morning and early afternoon. And I will be back here at the regular hurricane season 2020 and hurricane outlook and discussion later around 3 p.m. Eastern time this afternoon. Stay safe, everyone, and I will see you at 3 p.m.